Why do we make stupid choices? Everyone does it, mistakes are everywhere, but they still hurt a lot. As a society, we seem to fear making mistakes more than anything, and this is usually warranted as mistakes can cost us a lot. But most of the time, we view mistakes as way bigger than they really are and cause ourselves a great amount of suffering because of this. Everyone makes dumb choices. I know it sounds cliche, but it is true. Life is strange. It's full of ups and downs and twists and turns, goods and bads. Most of us have no idea what we're doing. If you're smart, you might have a few goals that you're working towards to keep you somewhat on track. But even then, life is full of surprises that are impossible to calculate. And if you're anything like me, then you probably make a lot of dumb decisions inside this incalculable world and feel really bad about making these decisions, as you value being rational and logical, thinking things through so that you can make the best choices. But if I value thinking rationally and logically so much, then why do I still make irrational choices? Why do I still have completely irrational fears? Why doesn't the world make rational sense? I should probably define rational and irrational so that you know what I'm really talking about here. I'm using the word rational to mean using reason and logic to come to conclusions, while being irrational is basing your conclusions on insufficient or no evidence. We live in a universe that does not care about our rationality. We have entropy and randomness to deal with on an unimaginable scale. Now, this sounds like an excuse for being dumb, trying to direct the blame onto something else, and to a certain extent it kinda is, because I am pretty dumb. The definition of entropy is a scientific concept as well as a measurable physical property that is most associated with a state of disorder, randomness, or uncertainty. Here I'm talking about the scientific concept, not the measurable property. It's just a good word to describe randomness. If we do delve deeper into the scientific perspective, however, we see that we are really trying to understand our universe and everything in it. Humans love that. We love to understand the whys about everything, and science is great at doing that. We've learnt much about our world in the last couple of centuries through utilising the scientific method, but by no means are we close to understanding everything. Much is unknown. Some argue that humans are simply not advanced biologically enough to comprehend the universe in its entirety, but for some reason, we still see rationality inside this completely irrational world as a virtue. Humans are the ones who invented order, and therefore rationality, as the natural world does not work this way. In fact, the only way for scientists and mathematicians to create random numbers is by observing physical processes, as we cannot predict these yet. What is most commonly used as random number generators are pseudo-random, which are not really random, as they are based on an algorithm which can be solved if the initial number is known. So, of course, rationality does have its place in the world, in science, mathematics, and technology. Within these subjects, there are clear-cut right and wrong answers. You either get the right answer and it all makes sense, or you don't. It's a world of black and white, where knowledge is being able to have the correct answer in specific situations. For example, when working on a broken mechanical machine, you can figure out exactly what isn't working so that you can then know how to fix it. It follows a rational, logical path. This is one reason many are drawn to subjects like math and engineering, where there are clear right and wrong answers. However, just because this thinking works wonderfully in one area doesn't mean that it applies to others. In subjects such as psychology, politics, or even living an average everyday life, rationality may be a misguided approach at certain times. With the number of curveballs that life throws, this kind of logical, straightforward thinking becomes near impossible, because life simply isn't full of black and white problems. It doesn't have clear-cut right and wrong answers. It can be argued that this is due to the Industrial Revolution that rationality has become such an important quality of living properly. As machines were integrated into our everyday lives, people start to view society as a big machine, and humans as smaller machines that make up the bigger one. And that all these machines can be tuned and perfected as long as we stay rational and think logically. The education system followed this thinking, as the primary goal was to get students ready for work in these machines, and now we highly value rational thinking. Okay, but what's so wrong with thinking rationally? Yeah, you said it's difficult in a world of chaos, but I can still try, can't I? I can hear you saying. Many people all over the political spectrum would probably agree that if only people would be more rational, then the world would be a better place. But there's a problem. How can so many people think that they are the ones being logical while the others state the same while having completely opposite ideas? It's because there's no black and white, right and wrong answer. We are all able to come to our own conclusions, logical or not. Now, I'm not saying I am any different or better. I try to be rational as much as possible. I try to base my views off evidence. I try not to make stupid decisions. And I get annoyed at others when I think that they aren't being as rational as I am. But the thing is that humans are not rational beings at the core. Rationality is impossible to remove from the human experience. While reason may be what sets us apart from other animals, we still have a lot of natural tendencies to compete with. And more importantly, we live inside a world that does not care at all if you are rational or not. Yes, being rational is not a bad thing. Using reason to back up claims is definitely a good thing. However, we must also accept irrationality's place in our lives. In 1972, Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky demonstrated, through rational and logical science, that individuals make irrational decisions under uncertain circumstances. Coining the term cognitive bias, proving that individuals create their own subjective realities from their perception of the world. For most of our decisions, we aren't carefully researching all the different possibilities and statistics. Instead, we use our lived experiences and previous knowledge that's all crammed somewhere in our subconscious and make a decision. I'm not saying that's a good thing, I'm just saying that life is messy. And even then, while bias gets a bad rap, it comes from our own personalities and is what makes up our preferences, and in some part who we are as individuals. As a side note, you shouldn't take from this that you should just sit on the fence and never make a decision because you're scared you won't be right. You should make what you think is the right decision and be confident in yourself, while also accepting that other options may be just as right in a world that is not black and white. And if you do end up making the wrong decision, you learn from it and probably gain more knowledge than if you had researched the problem and made the logical choice. Imagine if everyone lived completely rationally and logically, calculating the statistical possibilities, available options, and potential risk at every second. Would that really be considered living, or simply following a set-up path like a robot? In Dostoevsky's Notes from the Underground, a machine that can read a human's mind and tell them the best choice to make is posited. He explains that if you followed the instructions from a machine, you were similar to a slave, and that you would want to make an irrational spontaneous action to prove to yourself that you're still a human with freedom. With the world seemingly putting more and more pressure on trying to be as rational as possible, making every choice utilitarian, turning every hobby into a side hustle, not speaking unless you know exactly what you're talking about, more emphasis must be put on how irrational choices are a part of life. Thinking in a purely rational way, it is the best for all if we stop trying to be completely rational. Hopefully, this makes you feel a little better about regretful mistakes. If you think that you're dumb just because you make a lot of mistakes, understand that while it sounds cliche, it is human to make irrational choices. This may also help with your view of the world. Instead of looking at the world and seeing evil masterminds behind the world's problems, maybe just see them as humans that don't really know what's going to happen in the future, but have the courage to make choices anyway.